So I was telling you, Kevin, that's how I saved this client $50,000 off the cost of college this freshman year. Pretty amazing, wasn't it?
It was incredible. And then I came back with how I saved a client $60,000.
Yeah,
Yep.
very impressed.
hmm
Oh, hi there, everybody. How you doing? I'm JP, and I was in the. We got Kevin with us tonight. Uh, we're just having a little fun before we get going. We'll just give you guys a minute or so to get logged in and join us. So, um, I always ask this of every group, and I'd love to just hear from you guys. Put it in the chat, just because I might need to tailor some of my advice tonight. Can you put in the chat, like, what year are we graduating? Are we like class of 2027? Are we class of 2028, 29, 30? That would really help. Okay, okay, I'm seeing a theme here already. Lots of juniors. All right. 28, okay. 26, okay. 27. All right. This is good. This is good. All right. Thank you guys. Yeah, keep it in. All right. And I don't know. I'm just curious. Is anybody a newbie? Like, is this anyone's first time on a webinar with College A Pro? Do you know? Have you heard of us before? Is okay. We got a first already. All right. Um, so Bobby, I will not give you any pop quizzes. Oh no, you're not alone. Colleen and Sean. All right, you guys, no pop quizzes for you guys. You get a pass tonight. This is good. All right. I love it. I love that you guys are already interactive. This is going to be a fun group. I can tell. I'm excited. Um, let's see. Kevin, any wise words of wisdom that you want to? I kind of was repetitive. Wise words of wisdom. Uh, anything you want to say real quick? Say hello.
No, well,
Any questions?
so I can intro myself real quick, and then maybe you want to intro yourself.
Yeah.
But so I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm one of the college financial aid experts here at CAP, and JP, you've been doing this for a lot longer than me, but I've been doing this since 2018. I wake up every single day, and I am so thankful for my job, being able to help families, and I would say, and I know you feel the same way. I love what we do. We help families throughout this whole process. And anyways, doing this since 2018, got into it from the financial services industry, fell in love with college financial aid, never looking back, just love college financial aid, not so in love with financial services. And it's it's what I do. It's what gets me out of bed every day, as one of our colleagues would say. And yeah, I'm blessed in the sense that I've been able to work with literally, over 1,000 families. I've seen, I think, every situation you can imagine, and yeah, happy to be here tonight. But I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah. I'm my joke is I'm not actually homeless. I know I look like it, but I'm the my nickname is the Santa Claus of college planning, and I'm just you know you get over 50, you start putting on the weight like Santa. So anyway, the I'm embracing it. The but I got into this back in 2000 when I started working in the financial aid office at USC, and I became a director of financial aid. And I worked 18 years overall at USC. I worked alongside admissions and the dean's office, and was adjunct faculty for the last couple of years, even all that. So I've seen the ins and outs and behind the scenes of how the secret sauce is made, if you will, when it comes to uh, everything related to college. And yeah, and I'm in that unique position of having that inside experience with both financial aid and admissions. So, um, and I don't know if I think for me, it's really helping the kids and really finding their direction and figuring out how to get through this maze to college. And frankly, nowadays, I mean, I'm probably one of the older ones here, but the idea of going, back in my day, we just college was affordable. Like we could work and take out that Stafford loan and pay for college. Nowadays, that's just not a reality anymore. college has gotten so crazy expensive, and I can go off on tangents about all the reasons why and whatnot. But the system's broke, and there was a great New York Times article a couple years ago, Kevin, if you remember it. I'm going to paraphrase, where the authors basically described this college process as families are thinking we're playing checkers, but in reality colleges have been playing chess, and that's why families are left struggling, going like, what are we doing? Like, why didn't we get accepted here? Or why does it cost so much? And all that stuff. So I always look at it as like, my job is to help families learn the strategies of chess, and frankly play it better than the schools. So anyway, that's, if there's anybody, out of curiosity, anyone from California, I didn't see, does anyone, just maybe, you don't have to put it in the chat, but you can put an emoji. If, is there, do I have any California families? Maybe not. Oh, I see a couple hands. All right. So if you're familiar with Cash for College, the program through the California Student Aid Commission, CSAC, I helped co-author the very first Cash for College program 26 years ago. So that's my background.
I I think we're in great hands with you. It's
You're equally.
no, no, but I'm excited. Let me share my screen if that's okay. Um, bear with me for 1 second. And I'll just, before kicking it over to you, I'll just quickly, for anyone who doesn't know, we are College Aid Pro. Aside from helping families day in and day out, aside from being on the front lines with families, our goal is to essentially empower you to do this process the right way, empower you to shop smarter for college and not backwards. Everyone shops for college backwards, and we want to make sure that you have the tools, the knowledge, the resources to not shop backwards. So again, that is us. We are College Aid Pro, but I'll kick it over to you, JP.
Thank you. So for those who have heard of College Aid Pro, I think we tend to think of, be thought of as like, oh, just financial aid folks. But in truth, we're a holistic service group, if you will. Like, we help families think everything from admissions and to financial aid. And like, this is just I'd say a small sample of the types of questions we get. And I literally, parents sometimes look distressed when they come to us. I had a new mom on the phone crying with me this morning. She was so stressed about everything, and I had to walk her through it and calm her down and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I always say there is always a way. There is a way to get through this crazy thing called college. So there is definitely, though, a strategy behind what we do, and I'm I feel absolutely blessed to be working with such an amazing team of other experts at College Aid Pro. It's not just Kevin and me. There's a group of amazing insight experts and just dedicated people with the hearts to help families. So that's kind of what we do and why we do it. Let's move on to this little visual that I like to call navigating the maze to college. And frankly, I think this is a pretty decent analogy. We have roughly 4,000 colleges in America. And it's like, well, where do we start? Like, how do we get to that end goal? And, I always look at it as like, we got to, narrow down the list. We got to look at schools that are, an academic fit and financial fit and personal fit. And, oftentimes in just admissions, when we have an admissions talk, we talk about schools that are like, Target or a Safety or a Reach. I don't like those terms necessarily, but they're common terms. And, but we don't tend to think of schools in that way when it comes to the financials, and we should. So, I always want to make sure we emphasize the financial fit's kind of in the center of things. You got to think about your admission strategy, and you get to your final list of schools, and then at the end, hopefully, we get that accepted school, and we commit to a school and all that stuff. Win the prize, if you will. But But that's for us is to figure out, help families find those right schools for them and get accepted, and frankly make sure that they're affordable. So that's part of this maze that we're going to help you kind of walk through. So before we kind of get into it, just share a couple things here when it comes to the latest, admissions trends that we're seeing so far, a little bit from last year and what we're seeing already so far from this year. Um, One, uh, college applications have risen again. Number of applications submitted have risen the last few years, and if you think of it like in economic terms, when the supply has gone up, it's in this case it's raising the competition. So there is definitely schools nowadays that were maybe a target are now maybe a safe I'm sorry, a reach, just because now the schools are getting so many like quality, quote unquote, quality applicants. Um, I will say it's not across the board for every college. There's definitely some schools are enjoying the increased attention, if you will, but application inflation is impacting the odds of admission status. Um, for example, let me think. Like NYU compared to 5 years ago is receiving about 50% more applications today. This year, it's the fifth most applied to college in America. That's NYU. The top four colleges. This isn't going to be a surprise probably to my California families. The UC system is the largest college system, the most popular college system, but the top four colleges specifically are UC Irvine, Berkeley, San Diego, and UCLA. UCLA received, like over 146,000 applications. So just to give you an idea, like this is how much the competition is nowadays. Um, the other thing is, depending on what major you're applying to, that can also be very impactful of your admissions outcome. Uh, so, some certain majors are just frankly more popular than others, and you could even be looking at let's say a public school, and depending on the major, the admissions rate to that major could be just as competitive as it is to an Ivy. Um, like UCLA is a competitive school to begin with, but UCLA's um, admit rate to computer science program is like as low as 3%. Like that's more competitive than Harvard. And so admissions to, like I said, to the different majors is also having an impact. So if you're looking at Common Data Set, which is a fine resource, and you're like, oh, the admissions rate for such and such school is XYZ, you have to understand that it could be much different depending on the major, um, or even if it's out of state. That can all affect the actual admissions rate for a student. Um, the other thing, early applications. Um, I feel like you know back in my day, we just had regular admissions, right? There was no early action, there was no early decision, all that stuff. But it was just regular or rolling. And nowadays, I feel like regular is almost late. It's kind of like I grew up in the Midwest, and it's like the saying was like, if you show up on time, you're late. I almost feel like it's kind of becoming that trend with admissions. Like if you apply regular, it's almost like it's too late. More and more schools are admitting students through early decision, or at minimum early action, or admitting more of their class. But certainly early decision is starting to grow in popularity. Tulane, like if you apply, I'm going to pick on Tulane for a minute, I guess, but like if you apply regular decision to Tulane, you almost got no chance. You need to apply early to Tulane. Vanderbilt, my niece wants to go to Vanderbilt so bad. Thankfully, I got a year to try to help her with that. But their incoming class last year, they admitted 61% through ED. I'm friends with the president at Northeastern, and he's announced that he intends to fill more than half their class through ED. So anyway, it's making a difference. And so I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's the trend that is definitely strong. Test scores, uh, I will say test scores have always been important with an asterisk, if you will. There's some schools that are test blind, like UC's. They're test blind, or Cal State schools are test blind, meaning if you submit the scores, like they literally don't look at them. Now, that's not actually completely true. They don't look at your SAT or ACT test scores, but they absolutely rely on your AP test scores. So, so in that sense, test scores are still very, very important. Just maybe not the SAT or ACT. But you'll notice the schools that say they're test optional, and they're talking about, like, again, talking about SAT or ACT. Um, there's a disproportionate number of students that get accepted who submitted their test scores versus those who do not. And frankly, it's because colleges know, and hopefully you guys know this, but high school GPA is there's definitely an inflation with GPA, high school GPAs, and colleges know it too, and they firmly believe that SAT or an ACT score is a stronger indicator of preparedness. That's a whole nother debate, but that's what their data shows them time in and time out. And so if a student has a strong enough SAT or ACT score, it is definitely moving the needle, even at schools that say the test optional. And the final point I'll make is the personal narrative is still so important. It's always been important, really. Uh, the student's ability to tell their story on an application is crucial, especially for highly selective schools. And that's traditionally done through your personal statement and maybe supplemental essays. And that's still the case for now, but I think there's reasons to think that that might evolve in the next couple of years. With the rise of Chat GPT and other AI platforms, more and more admissions folks are questioning the authenticity of these essays and whatnot. And is it really reflective of the student's writing style and all that? And so I know a lot of my friends in admissions are talking about, like, they're testing out ideas or considering implementing more like recorded videos, or maybe bringing into the as a normal process. And some schools do this, a normal process of interviews, but they're looking at trying to other ways to try to capture the student's authentic narrative, their authentic story, if you will, because they're questioning if the essays are really doing that anymore. But at the end of the day, they're being able to tell their story is important. The way they do that might be evolving over the next couple of years. So anyway, that's some of the stuff I've been observing with admissions trends and all that stuff. So now that said, like, how do we find, like, what's the best colleges, right? And if you will go and advance it, Kevin, the I will say there really is no such thing as a best college. I hope you know that. There is no, it just, that's make believe. There's no best college. Um, the key is finding the schools that are the right fit for your child. For you, if any of your students are listening, what's the right school for you, right? Um, and so, actually, I'd like to put it in the chat. Let's see if I'd like to hear your opinions. Like, if you were, what kind of criteria do you think you would be looking for when picking a school? For what are criteria are you guys thinking about? What or your child's thinking about? Put it in the chat. Just tell me, what are you guys? What's important to you, if you will? I'd like to kind of get a sense of that. Anybody? High level academics, but not cutthroat competitive. All right. Culture, social life. Yeah. there's a common, and just on those two things, I'll say like that's a common thing. It's hard to research. Like, there's some campuses that are, very strong academically, right? They're known for their academics, but one campus, there it could be a very cutthroat culture where you're fighting against your fellow classmates for resources or attention or whatever, and then other campuses is complete opposite, and it's very collaborative. Um, that's something that I think is very important to know about a campus. Um, Someone wrote value of degree minus cost, basically an ROI, a financial ROI, 100%. Speaking my language on that one. So, but anyway, it's like how do you go about finding these schools that are quote unquote a right fit? Um, I'm just going to show you on the next screen my very pragmatic, not sexy in any shape of way, but just very pragmatic way of how I go about this. And I kind of touched upon it in that maze earlier, and just say I think of it as a funnel system, a filtration system, if you will. And I take this group of 4,000 colleges, if you will, and first I try to narrow down on academic fit. And there's a couple things you can say about that, but I'll just at the moment say, does it offer the major, right? Does it offer that right program for your kid? And so I just moved out of California, but I lived in California for 28 years. So most of my families were California based. And I would have an argument with a family every single year. Not an argument, but a family would argue with me where they'd say, we want our child to go to UCLA. I'm like, great, fine school. And then I'd say, what are they going to study? And they're going to study business. And I'm like, okay, well, then they're not going to go to UCLA. Well, no, they got to go to UCLA. And I'm like, well, then they can't study business. Well, they got to study business. And I'm like, well, then they can't go to UCLA. And we'd just be in this cycle. I'm like, look, UCLA doesn't offer the program. You know, one of these has to give. And I'm going to say you don't pick a school for the name. It's got to offer the program, right? So the simplest thing, but just does it offer the right program, right? Then after you find the schools that are an academic fit, you're going to narrow it down and go, which of these schools are a good financial fit? And I'm going to just simply say at the end of the day, does it fit your budget? That's the simplest way to think about it. And then, and I look at this as like, if I'm to use a car analogy, if your child's like turning 16 and you're like, oh, let's get him a car, as a parent, I say, if I'm going to let my kid have a car, my first priority is I want it to be safe and reliable, right? Think of that in college terms. That's being an academic fit. It's the boring stuff the kid doesn't really get all excited about, but is it safe and reliable? And then does it fit my budget? I mean, I'm not taking my kid when they turn 16. I'm not taking them to the Maserati dealership. I'm not taking them to the Bentley dealership or the Rolls Royce dealership. I'm not spending $400,000 on a car. I can't afford it. I shouldn't spend $400,000 on an education that I can't afford either. Like it can't happen, right? So what's my budget? And at that point, to continue with the car analogy, if I tell my kid, hey, here's a list of cars that are safe and reliable. Here's your budget. I frankly don't care if the student picks a green car, a red car, a blue car, a convertible, a hatchback, whatever. Those are those personal fit criteria, right? As long as it hit my criteria of being an academic, in this case, college, academic fit and financial fit. So that's what I let my kids do is I say, shop them down based upon their own personal fit criteria. We don't need to worry about what they're picking at that stage if I've pre-vetted the list. And then hopefully they shop it down and kind of narrow it down to their top 10 schools. And if they have it down to their top 10, then you can really put together a focused admission strategy for those schools. That's basically my, again, very pragmatic way of how I help families find these schools that are a right fit, right? Now let's just expand slightly on the academic fit, as I did kind of gloss over it, but like I said, offers the right major, but things also I want to look at, like I have learned, I wish I would have learned this when I was in high school, but I learned about myself that my brain doesn't learn from reading books and listening to lectures. I learn best from doing, right? So in my case, I would be looking for schools that offer like co-ops or those experiential learning environments, not the traditional, sit in a lecture hall of 400 other kids. That's important to me. I maybe an academic fit is a school where they have a core level arts curriculum, like USC does, and so that doesn't kind of matter what the major is. Everyone has to take the same core requirements, and frankly, that helps if they should change their major, they're not starting over, right? Some kids want to be able to do research with as an undergrad with faculty. Is that a possibility? Maybe they want to be in an honors program or some interdisciplinary program. These are the kinds of things you want to be thinking about. And there's more, but this is just some of the things that you want to think about when you're trying to narrow down based upon an academic fit. Okay. Then, like I said, next is the financial fit. I'm just going to say, can we afford it? Kevin will talk more about that. But the personal fit, everybody's going to be different on this, right? Like I discovered about myself when I was in high school that a super important criteria for me was an open campus versus a closed campus. I don't like open campus. I very much required to have a closed campus. I wanted that like movie esque campus experience where I step onto campus and I know I'm on campus, right? Um, that was big for me, right? For me, I didn't care so much about the size of the campus, but I did want to, reasonable class sizes, that kind of stuff. Because I watched Animal House way too much as in high school. I wanted a school that had a good Greek system, right? Um, the social life, that stuff, whatever. Every kid is different on that. At the end of the day, whatever it is, I'm going to always say there's no amount of research you can do online or with social media that is going to be better than just simply visiting the campus, like on a tour or something to that effect, and making sure that the best way I describe this is making sure that you vibe or the campus vibes with you. And you can't research that. You got to experience that. And so, before I'll say you can't necessarily visit every college before applying to it, but you definitely need to visit the campus before you commit, or even consider applying ED. You got to make sure you vibe with that campus. You got to be able to, your child needs to be able to say, I know I belong here, that I will thrive here. I am comfortable living here for the next 4 years. And that's so important to be done from the student's perspective. I've had parents who have tried to kind of instill their wants onto their child, and I'm like, no, you're not the one going to college. It's them. It's their experience. So anyway, these are the things I think about with in the terms of that personal fit, right? Um, but then once they have it narrowed down to, like, let's say again the top 10, they got to come up with an admission strategy. And let's see, Kevin can move that forward for me.
Sorry, it was stuck.
Oh no, I understand. So the mission strategy, I'm going to be honest with you. So you're gonna, if you listen to other quote unquote experts, oftentimes they're gonna like tell you like, this is the one strategy, this is what you got to do. I'm gonna be honest, and it's not that cut and dry. Your strategy depends, and it's gonna depend on how selective the schools are, right? And so I like to break up the strategy in generic terms between a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy. And I'm going to say every school, you're going to need a defensive strategy. So whether the school's not very selective, meaning they admit most applicants, to the schools that are very selective, everybody needs a strong defensive strategy or the appropriate defensive strategy. But as the schools are more and more selective, you also need an offensive strategy, because frankly, at that point, your defensive strategy does not differentiate you from the sea of everybody else. It's going to be your offensive strategy, right? So what am I talking about when I say defense and offense? So just simply, I'm going to say defensive strategy. Think of it as your academics. You need appropriate GPA. You need appropriate test scores, number of AP scores, like 4s and 5s, how many, demonstrate that academic rigor. If you do an SAT or an ACT, doesn't matter which, are we at least above the 25th percentile? Um, we want to think about that. Like, are we doing enough to convince admissions that, hey, if you admit me, I can handle it here. I can handle the academic rigor of your college, right? And of the maybe 8 minutes that they spend on a college application, they make that determination in about 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, right? And so you got to just prove to them, I can handle it. I'm not going to flunk out. Like that's all they care about when they look at your defensive strategy. You could have a perfect GPA, perfect test scores, and not get admitted. And that's, like every year there's always those stories in social media, like I had the perfect GPA and perfect SAT score, and I got rejected from 12 schools. And, the system's rigged. And I'm like, no, it's not. You just don't know what you're playing checkers and they're playing chess. You played the wrong game. And so it's very obvious why you didn't get admitted, because they thought their grades and test scores were going to get them admitted. I was like, no, they don't. They just get you, beyond a 30-second look on the application. So for the offensive strategy, that's when I'm going to kind of lump a big of part of it under knowing your personal brand. I don't like that term. I'm old. I like to call it just knowing your genuine, authentic self and be able to. Are you telling your story well? And do you tell your story not just from like essays? I mean, you want your essay to be able to tell that story, but are you telling your story through your extracurricular activities? Are they reflecting your story? Do they reflect? If I say I want to be, I'll refer to an example in a second. But if I say I want to be a computer science engineer, do my extracurricular activities reflect that? Uh, Strong letters of recommendation. It rarely is this. You want to get the letter from a teacher who's like that you got an A in, right? You're like, oh, it was an easy class, I got an A in. Those teachers usually write very bland, generic letters of recommendation. You almost want like the teacher of a class where you struggled in and where you had to spend extra time and that you went to their office hours, or you're so curious about the topic that you spent extra time with that teacher, someone who can say more about you. Like you want those letters of recommendation. The demonstrating interest, like I'll just say at minimum, students need to be, signing up for more information and of course checking those emails, following them on social media, engage those social media posts. That's kindergarten level stuff. But at minimum, you need to do that. But beyond that, build relationships with the admissions, the local rep, right? Whoever is coming to your high school for college night, get to know them. Introduce yourself on college night. Get their, card. Send them a thank you email. All that stuff. Get to know them. They're the ones that are going to be your biggest advocate for when it comes to saying yes, let's admit this person, and yes, let's give them a scholarship, right? Like befriend, if you will, your local admissions reps. But this story I'm going to share real quick is a couple of years ago, a handful of years ago, I had a family come to me. They came to me late in the process where the student already had his application done. He wanted to apply to computer science, and he had good grades, good test scores, all that stuff. But his telling his story is where he completely fell off the rails. And I'll just share one example of it. So when it came to listing the extracurricular activities on his Common App, which you can list up to 10, you don't need to do all 10, but he listed out of the 10, 7 of them were different ways to say he loves swimming. He had one thing about robotics club, and I forget what the other 2 were, but almost nothing that conveyed to admissions like, hey, in my free time, I'm doing XYZ about computer science. And his parents were very concerned about this application. I agreed with them. I was like, this isn't going to work. And I worked with them, and basically it was just like learning about him and said, okay, this is how we tell your story. And we redid just even redid everything. But one of the things we did was the extracurricular list, right? And we only now mentioned swimming twice, not 7 times. And we definitely put like activities that were related to computer science. And we did a much better job of telling the story about why he was interested in computer science and where it stemmed from. But at the end of the day, he didn't like any of my recommendations. And so I made a bet with him. And we played very early in the season. And I said, okay, you pick any three schools you want to send your application to and send it to them. We're going to pick three, you pick three schools to send my version of your application to. And let's see how this plays out. And then we can move forward with the remaining schools. His version of application resulted in 0 acceptances, rejected from every school. My version of the application, he got accepted 3 out of 3. And obviously we used my application for the rest of the schools. But here's the thing. I want you to listen and hear this. It's the same kid with the same classes, same test scores, same grades, but completely different results based upon how he played the offensive strategy. So that's why I just want to make sure it's how clear I'm being clear about how important it can be. You know, again, it's not warranted every time. It depends on the schools that we're looking at. But if you're looking at schools that are remotely selective, like admit 50% or less, you got to think about it. All right. I'm just glancing real quick. So many people. I'm looking at the Q&A if it's
I
okay,
left
Kevin.
those three for you.
Okay. So many people. So question asks, how many people hiring professional writers that just write the kids college essays wish they brought them to a room like to see and make them write one essay command? Do the colleges really believe these brilliant essays? Great question. So yeah, I can tell you like oftentimes I can tell like a parent or somebody helped them, Grammarly or somebody helped them or something helped them with their essay because I'm like, this doesn't sound like a high school kid. And I'm like, yeah, I read, oh golly, not quite 1,000 essays a year, but think about admissions. They read they read thousands a week. They know what high schoolers sound like, and so that can really backfire. The only time I have had a couple kids, it's rare, but I have had a couple kids who do write brilliantly. But I was like, "Did you write this?" And they shared with me other papers that they wrote in high school, and I was like, "Okay, you really do write like this." But otherwise, I'm usually telling them like, "Hey, this is way you don't sound like a high school kid." So, but yeah, that it is an issue. It can be an issue. Um, what's the number of engineering schools a kid should apply to if her grades or scores are very high and parents are and they don't need very limited eligibility pay? There isn't a magic number of engineering schools a kid should apply for. It's just targeting the right ones and making sure you put together that right strategy. This isn't a direct correlation to your question, but to give you this might help. An anecdote that is I hear repeated year after year, and I've kind of seen it play out to be true, is for like let's say people who are applying to Ivies, very selective schools, which engineering schools can have very competitive admissions rate comparable to Ivies. If assuming just the kind of lack of a strategy, on average, kids get accepted maybe 1 out of 16. I would never say apply to 16 because that tells me you just lacked a strategy. But for those who are kind of DIYing it, and you're kind of just throwing mud at the wall, seeing what sticks, yeah, maybe 1 out of 16. Looking at nursing as a major, what are the thoughts on schools that don't have their own nursing program, but they partner with a community college? Actually, I'm fine with that. Frankly, sadly, a lot of schools are dropping nursing program. I had to oversee the last year at USC's nursing program. We had a great program years ago, and I had to oversee the closure of it, and I was so sad about that. But yeah, if that's the path, that doesn't bother me. It's just look at the end goal, like where are we trying to end up? Because there's different paths with nursing too, but find the path that's going to help set them up for success. But in of itself, community college or partnering with the community college for that I don't see a problem with that. All right. I am gone too long. I'll pass it off to you, sir.
You did not go too long. I think stuff everyone needs to know and super, super helpful. So someone wrote in the chat earlier, should I throw at a school based on budget because some of them seem like they have such high sticker prices? And no, you shouldn't. You should throw out a school based on the projected net cost, meaning if you do your homework and you do your research and you know for sure it's never going to be affordable for your family, no sense in keeping it on the list. And the reason I'm sharing this is because how do you figure this out? How do you get started? MyCAP, and I have it ready to go. I just dropped it in the chat, but that is a link to MyCAP, and I'm also going to screen share it as well. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay. So if you haven't already created an account, you should absolutely go to the link I just put in the chat and create a free MyCap account. And what you'll do when you create the account is you'll put in some basic info, right? Uh, Birth year, gross income, assets, and so forth, because that's going to help us calculate your SAI, which will explain what that actually is in a minute. But more importantly, more important than diving into what SAI is or anything else is, what are the schools actually going to cost your specific family based on the information you put in? That's what these numbers are. These are your family's projected net costs. And you'll be able to tell ahead of time. You'll be able to shop for college the right way by doing this. This is something that we help families with. We've obviously got MyCap for it, but this is how you should be looking when you're picking schools. You can use this to build a school list. You can go through it and decide, all right, based on our current list, do we have schools that are affordable or they're not? And then you can essentially follow through the rest of the process. But just wanted to share this real quick. Before I click out, JP, is there anything you want to add here?
No, I mean, I don't want to get too far in the weeds and potentially overcomplicate things, but I will say, to the comment you were making earlier, like you see the schools on the right and you see their, well, I guess you do see their net cost, but when you look at any of the schools and you see that sticker price, I mean, frankly, when I worked at USC, there was people that would have said like, "Hey, I'm not even going to bother applying to USC because it's can't afford that sticker price." Um, uh, can I share one more story anecdote?
Yeah, yeah, of
All right,
course.
sorry. So my very first time working in the financial aid office, I was 3 months in, and back when my knees didn't hurt, and the I went to an event with where admitted students were invited to. It was at an alumni's home. It was in a nice part of LA, and I looked at the RSVP list from admissions, and so I was like printing off financial aid offer letters because it was about this time of year, so like a lot of people, everything wasn't all online, so everything was done by mail, so a lot of people didn't have their financial aid offer letters, and admittedly, out of the 20 people coming, 19 of them didn't qualify for financial aid. I'll be honest, but there was one kid who qualified for everything, and so I go to the event, and I'm there 10 minutes early because I'm a good Midwesterner. And I first family, first kid to show up happens to be this kid. And the host was like, "Oh, the financial aid guy's here, no one else." And he goes, "Oh, I need to talk to the financial aid guy." And he comes up to me, he's like, "Can we talk?" And I go, "Yeah." And we go in the back, and actually went in the backyard. And he's like, tells me how it's been his dream to come to USC ever since he was fifth grade. And he's telling me how his parents told him if he works hard, does good in school, all this kind of stuff, he can get to any school he wants and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And he goes, when I got that acceptance letter, I was so happy. And he goes, but the next day I got really sad. And I was like, why? And he goes, is my parents told me there's no way they can afford USC. And I can't go. And I looked at him. I said, you know, you're right about one thing. Your parents can't afford to send you to USC. But that's what financial aid's for. And he hadn't seen his offer letter. It hadn't been mailed out yet. I hand him his financial aid offer. And at that time, USC was only 42,500. Seems like a bargain nowadays. It was only 42,500 as a sticker price. And we were giving him 42,500 in financial aid. And I said, your parents don't need to afford it. We're covering it. That kid bawled and gave me the biggest hug. And that's why I was like, I love helping families with this stuff. But that at that time, the average income of a family at USC was lower than the average income of families at UCLA. And so that's why I'm a big I shout it from the rooftops. Never judge a school by its sticker price. Um, Look at what's going to be your net cost. And as Kevin's showing, MyCAP is arguably the best tool out there to really capture what the school's net prices are, more accurate than the school's net price calculators. And you can see it all in one place. But anyway, sorry, my little side story.
Sorry at all. Let me go back to sharing our slides. Okay, so when it comes to financial aid, I don't want to overcomplicate it, right? Financial aid is ultimately a discount off of the full price, off of the sticker price like we were just talking about. And that's why it's important to know what your family's particular discount will be. But that discount, right, there's different essentially buckets or different forms of what it could come as. And one of those is need-based grants. And need-based grants are based on your family's tax return, right? Your assets. It's based on your family's financial profile. All the information you put on the FAFSA, and if the school takes the CSS profile, all the information you put on the CSS profile. Now, merit-based scholarships have nothing to do with your family's finances. They're totally based on your students' academics, your students' talent profile. Again, totally removed from your income, your assets, everything else, just based on how well your student did in high school and their talent profile. Now, both of those buckets are free money, meaning that you're going to get those funds and you do not have to pay them back. There's another bucket, and that is called self-help. And self-help is money that has to be worked for or paid back. And it's loans, right? So that has to be paid back, and usually with interest. Or work study, which is essentially your student getting a job on campus. So that is considered financial aid. It is something that you'll see ultimately on financial aid awards if you qualify for it, but it's not free. So the financial aid that you want to focus on, that you want to try to maximize, is always going to be free money, meaning need-based grants or merit-based scholarships. Now, to understand what you'd be eligible for, we quickly shared before MyCAP and then that SAI up top. But you need to know how this is all calculated. And the starting point is that cost of attendance, that all-in number, which is the sticker price. And that includes like tuition fees, housing, meals, but it also includes estimates for transportation and estimates for books, minus your student aid index. And JP, you and I we love to explain student aid index one way, right? It's a number that's used to measure your financial strength relative to the poverty line. And it's ultimately something that they're going to use to determine, all right, do you qualify for any need-based grants or do you not? You don't need to overly complicate it. You don't need, like, we know obviously the inner workings of the formulas and all of that, but you don't need to worry about that. Right? You complete an account on MyCAP and you'll ultimately see what your SAI is, which is a percentage of your income, percentage of assets, all of those things. The difference between your cost of attendance and your SAI is that need. And that's what the school is essentially now tasked with meeting. The big difference, you could qualify for every dollar, right? Your SAI could be zero and the school could be $60,000. Doesn't mean the school is going to give you your $60,000 of need. Every single school meets a different percentage of need. And that's, again, what makes this part so tricky. And that is already calculated in MyCAP. And this is part of list building, like understanding what you qualify for. If you don't know your SAI already, please go figure this out before you start building a list, before you dive too far into it. Think through all of the numbers, because to do what JP talked about in terms of navigating that maze, you need to understand what you qualify for and how you're going to pay. Now, colleges, they're looking back in terms of income. And this slide's based on 2026 students, which are current seniors, but we saw a lot of families tonight have juniors, right? So that's class of 2027. The tax year that just ended, 2025, is going to be the base income year for financial aid. And they're going to reevaluate financial aid every year, right? So 25 is the base year, but it doesn't mean it's the only year they're going to look at. And for anyone we saw some 28s on the call, the current year that we're in, 2026, will be the base income year for your students. And they're looking primarily at line 11, which is your adjusted gross income. There's a lot of other numbers that they're considering, but that's a really big driving factor behind your SAI. And student income allowance, it's essentially how much your student can make on the FAFSA before it counts against them for financial aid. And 25, 26 was 11,510. 26, 27 was 11,770. And we'll see what 27, 28 is, but you can kind of see the pattern. I don't imagine it's much more than that 11,770 number. But it's great to know, especially if you're going to take steps to plan, right? Families we work with are always actively looking like, how do we lower that SAI? How do we qualify for more money? Maybe you're a business owner. Maybe there's something you can do with student income. So there's definitely some planning opportunities. Also, there's certain things you should never do in a base year to raise your AGI. Now, in terms of family assets, so student assets are weighted the most heavily. And student assets, they're assessed 20% on the FAFSA, 25% on the CSS profile, which is very, very different from a parent asset. And real quick on student assets, think your student's checking account, your student savings account, but also if you have a UGMA or a UTMA established in their name. Now for parent accounts are 5.64%. And that is going to be your checking savings, but also your student's 529. Your student's 529 is considered a parent asset. Educational savings plans on the FAFSA and on the CSS profile are considered a parent asset. And even more so on the FAFSA, you don't have to put sibling 529s. So again, when it comes to assets, just like income, there are planning opportunities that even though the base year is passed, that you can still take up until the day you file the forms to put yourself in a spot to qualify for more money. And everything they're asking for are non-retirement assets. They're not asking you for your IRA or your 401k. It's always going to be non-qualified accounts, brokerage accounts, like I said before, checking accounts, savings accounts, and so forth. Now, when it comes to 529s, not only are you using your child whose form you're filing, right? That's who you're including on the FAFSA. When it comes to the CSS profile, you include all students, right? So if you have a 529 for your other two children, you would include all of that on the CSS profile. But interestingly, what's excluded are grandparent 529s, right? So grandparent 529s, they don't get reported on the FAFSA. There is a question on the CSS profile about family contributions, but grandparent 529s are not explicitly asked for on the FAFSA or the CSS profile. So again, another planning opportunity. And home equity, that's a really big factor. And you can see some of the names of the schools on here. And I feel like we have to change this slide because we're always picking on NYU and BC, but we really are. But
we got more we could pick on.
Yeah, there's quite a few bad actors. But these are schools that literally take, like BC, NYU, they take every dollar of equity in your house and they assess it at 5% as a means to pay for college, right? And that is, for a lot of families, it's a tough pill to swallow. But if you have a lot of equity in your house, it could really change how much aid you get from these particular schools. And when it comes to schools like the Ivies, like Harvard and MIT, they don't use home equity at all. So there's a really big difference. Now, these schools that I'm talking about, these are CSS profile schools. The FAFSA, they don't ask for the equity in your primary home at all. They do ask for the equity if you own rental properties, like investment properties, even if you own a beach house, right? They ask for that equity, but they never ask on the FAFSA for the equity in the house that you live in, your primary house. On the CSS profile, they want to know the year of purchase, the purchase price. They want to know the current market value, and they want to know how much debt you have against it, as well as the monthly payment. So they are going to look at those numbers. And again, those CSS profile schools, a lot of them use home equity to some extent. Can get a little bit confusing because some of them use every dollar, like NYU and BC. Some only use 2 times your income or 3 times your income. So again, it's specific to the colleges.
Yeah, I can tell you, like, other schools that are using full home equity: Drexel, Elon, Emerson, Fairfield, Fordham, so on and so on. But like you said, some are capped, like Franklin and Marshall caps it at 120%. Um, Grinnell, 200%. In other schools like USC or Stanford don't use it at all. It's all over the map.
And that's also part of when you're building a list, knowing that really good, knowing what schools do and don't, because that could be part of, we'll talk about this in a second, but a part of the appeals process. Um, so it is all over the map. When it comes to business owners, the FAFSA, just a recent change this year, small businesses are excluded. So if you have a small family-owned business, fewer than 100 full-time employees, doesn't go anywhere on the FAFSA. However, it does go on the CSS profile. And with that, you do have to report a value, you have to report debt against the business, but also if you're writing off a lot of things, like you have a lot of depreciation or other, what we'll call, I guess, illegitimate in the eyes of the colleges expenses, they can add that back in as income. So those CSS profile schools, they're really doing a deep dive in your finances.
Yeah. We still do collect like business tax returns.
Yeah.
So we can see what are those things that you're writing off. Because yeah, that's IRS, that's cool to write off like depreciation or different kinds of expenses, but for financial aid, they're not assessing your taxable income. They're looking at your financial strength. So they'll add that stuff back in.
You'll even see it on some net price calculators. What are your Schedule 1 business losses?
Oh yeah.
And they'll add that right back in as income.
Dollar for dollar. Yep.
Yep. Untaxed. Um, Now, divorced or separated families. So divorced or separated families, again, this is going to be very different. On the FAFSA, only one parent, right? The parent who provides the most financial support is filling the form out. That's the only income, it's the only assets they're going to look at FAFSA only schools. The CSS profile, a lot of those schools require something called the non-custodial profile, which is essentially just a CSS profile for the other parent. And they're going to look at both parents' incomes. So you could have very, very different financial aid awards from FAFSA only schools and CSS schools that use both parents because they're essentially counting that other household. Again, just big planning opportunities. There are some schools that are CSS profile schools, like Providence, right? Elon, probably keep going, but that only use the primary parent's information and they don't take the non-custodial information. But at the schools we were referencing before, like the NYUs, the BCs, they're using both households. And there is something called a non-custodial waiver. So if there happened to be, no contact, no support, abuse, specific circumstances, you can actually get that requirement waived. But it's not easy to get that waived. There has to be legitimate, serious circumstances to do so. Now, I just looked at the time. We're definitely going to go over, guys. I'm very sorry. We're probably going to go like 10 minutes over. So
I'll make it worth your while. We'll do bonus round questions at the end.
let's do it. But so your SAI is high, right? So let's say that you take the time, you calculate your SAI and it's high. What do? Don't look at schools that only give a need-based aid if you don't want to spend 90 or 100 grand a year, right? MIT, Harvard, you can see the schools that are there. Focus on schools that discount with merit aid. And you can see Denison, Alabama is a great example of a public school that, give sizable merit scholarships. Case Western, we could go on and on, but there's so many schools that give discounts via merit scholarships to students. That is what your focus is. If you don't qualify for anything, your SAI is, let's say, $100,000. You're going to end up paying sticker price at many of these colleges here on the right-hand side. So avoid them. Now, we get asked this all the time. I would say it's probably one of the top questions we get asked. Why should I still bother? Why should I even submit the financial aid forms? So there's a lot of reasons. The biggest reason, in my opinion, appeals and the federal direct student loan. But that being said, at some schools, like an NYU, like a Santa Clara, freshman year is your only chance to apply for financial aid. You have to apply freshman year to even be considered in future years. There's a lot of colleges that require the FAFSA. I say a lot. There's a good amount of colleges that require the FAFSA for some scholarship, merit scholarship, not need-based. Virginia Tech, that was a recent one that I was dealing with for a family where, again, they require the FAFSA. that particular family I'm talking about was international, so they couldn't file a FAFSA. Therefore, they weren't eligible for some of the merit scholarships. But uh, very important to file them. And then also, a lot of families, so many families think I make 200 grand, I'm not going to get anything. Colleges are $100,000. You can make $200,000 and get 50 grand a year in free money. So don't assume that you don't qualify for any need-based aid. There's a chance that you're eligible and you don't even realize it. We've even worked with families who make 600,000, have 3 kids in college at the same time, and qualify for some need-based aid. Okay, now for the FAFSA, it goes live October 1st of your student senior year. We've already talked through based on the prior year, and all this would be done on studentaid.gov. If you don't have accounts already, you absolutely can go and create accounts and save the backup code. CSS profile, this goes live October 1st. Somewhere around 200, 250 colleges require this in addition. It's not, it doesn't replace the FAFSA, it's in addition to the FAFSA. Home equity is treated as an asset at many of the schools. We talked through business owners, we've talked through all these other reasons, but it's important to know with the CSS profile, you actually log in as your student to College Board. Now, there's a lot of different reasons to go back to a college and ask for more money. One of those might be that the base income year isn't accurate, right? So 25 isn't accurate for your family, right? The circumstances have changed. That's an appeal. Now, successful appeals, you do want to think ahead. I mentioned before with home equity, you want to position yourself to be successful. The most successful appeals start before you even file the forms. And even more so, I'd say the most successful appeal is when you don't have to appeal at all. Or you figured out how to position yourself, how to file the forms in a way that covers everything. But not always the case. Again, you when it comes to changing income, you have to address that with the college. Now, for appeals, they could be need-based or they could be based on merit. And you're going to want to have a story. You're going to want to be personal. You're going to want to be persistent. If we're doing merit appeals, your student wants to lead the charge. If we're doing need-based appeals and it's circumstances that you need to explain, like a loss of income or expenses, you're going to lead the charge. And you want to dive into expenses. You want to dive into every circumstance you can to fight for more money. More money is, I think, won on appeals than private scholarships. Like, this is where time should really be focused, in my opinion. I think it's such an important step in the process that you definitely do not want to skip over it. But okay, not as bad as I thought. Only 3 minutes over. So now let's say that we've shared a ton of information with you tonight. Let's say that you don't know where to go next, or you're just starting this process and you want to see if you're on the right path, or you don't know if you're eligible for any financial aid or scholarships and you want to talk to us. Well, that's what we're offering. We're offering a chance to talk to us. And actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second. Do you have the link to put in the
I'm putting in the chat right now.
okay, perfect. But I'm also going to share our landing page as well.
So basically, the link I just put in the chat, I'm just gonna say it's like if you whatever class you are, whatever you're 27, 28, 29. I mean, I'm already getting class of 30s, right?
You're full for class of 27,
Oh,
right?
I'm completely full for class of 27 for admission stuff. I'm probably half full, half capacity for 28. But I'm just gonna say if you're unsure about your situation, maybe you even think you're confident about your situation, but you're just like want to test it, if you will. Book a quick consult with us. Tell us what what you're thinking, what your thoughts are, what concerns are, and frankly, we'll try to help direct you to like ways we can help you best. At the end of the day, I always say proactive strategy is way better than reactive strategy. And then the other thing I always tell you is, I don't care, time is that one asset that it doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. We all have the same time. And if you plan early, you have more time, you have more asset, right? If you wait till the end, that time has almost now become a liability because it's, we just don't have the time to do what we need to do to be proactive. But yeah, book a consult just, and like I said, we can see how we can help and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's so important to take action, to understand again where you're at, what you qualify for, and if you're going down the right path or the wrong path. And that's what the meetings are for, to talk through if you're going the right direction and if we can help. Um, I would also say, please don't feel like you're too early ever. We get in front of so many families throughout the year who are like, my gosh, I wish I talked to you guys sooner. Like if we could only record everyone who says that to us and we share the truth, but everyone waits until it's just, I think, human nature. You wait until you actually have to face a problem or deal with something to actually take action. This is not a joke. This is an expensive, college is a huge investment. Get ahead of it. So again, this the links in the chat. We do work with families. I was saying before, like I know I don't do college admissions. JP's already full for class of 2027. We have plenty of folks on our team who do work with families and still have availability for current juniors, but we work with families throughout this whole process. I mean, company wide, we work with thousands of families a year throughout this entire process, all different means. And we're truly the experts in the field. We're there side by side with families. And in terms of DIY, we do, of course, have what I shared before. We have MyCAP, and we have a way where if you are 100%, like you're going to do this on your own, you file your own taxes, and you know you don't want help, you never want help with this process, then $4.99 a month, and you get to put in unlimited schools, and you get access to all of these additional benefits. And we've gotten asked a couple of times, will there be a recording? Yes, there will. It will be released tomorrow. So again, I would forget these two options here. Even if you're a DIYer, even if you want to have us do this whole process with you, just talk to us. Let's figure out what the best next step is. But two things real quick. I forgot to mention this. You do have to book it by tonight, so midnight. That's midnight Pacific time for it to be free. And then you also have to schedule the meeting before 2:21. So you can see here, there's definitely some availability. But let me stop sharing. And again, I thought we were going to be worse on time. I think we did okay.
Well, give me my opportunity to shine and make this go longer. No,
No, but you
uh,
did promise to.
yes. For those who are sticking around, um, there's a few Q and A's here I want to touch.
Yeah.
So I'll do the first one. That's the easy one, I should say. Do you have to be a perfect student to get merit-based aid? No. Uh, what you need to be, though, is the type of student. Well, hold on. There's no such thing as a perfect student. But second, the reason I say that is because what you need to be is the type of student that that institution is looking for. So the strategies that you need to implement, that I talked about, that you need to implement to win admissions, basically the same strategies that you use to win scholarships. But no, perfect. There is no such thing as a perfect student, and I have plenty of students win scholarships all the time. Another one, I'm gonna. All right, I'll give you the question first. Jennifer, you asked a wonderful question. I appreciate this question. What about students who don't know what they want to major in? A lot of schools say that's okay, but is it really? Well, I'm going to give you a controversial answer, but it's the correct answer. Um, in the technical sense of your question, if you're asking, is it okay for admissions purposes? It depends on the school. Like some schools truly are like, have an undecided and it's totally fine. And for admissions purposes, that's okay. Not all schools do. Some schools say, like the UCs, like you got to pick a major, and you can't. The UCs, you pretty much can't change your major. So there's no gaming the system. Here's my controversial take, even though it's accurate, it's going to be viewed controversial by many. Historically, there was no such thing as applying to college as undecided. That didn't exist in the 70s, in the 60s, and anything like that. It came about magically the same time that Parent Plus loans got introduced as a way to help pay for college. And colleges said, here's a great way to get more revenue. Because again, keep in mind, in the 80s, not everyone went to college. Less than 50% of the population went to college. And they said, this is a great way to generate more revenue. We can say, you don't need to have a plan. You don't need to decide, just come for the sake of learning. And they created this, undecided major. And way it gets used and abused nowadays is when someone's undecided, they magically tend to get routed to the programs or classes that of departments that are maybe struggling to get their enrollment numbers, or they're maybe up for an accreditation review and they're struggling to pass. And suddenly all those undecided kids get advised to, like, oh, these are great classes, they're the best classes. The kids don't know, is they're never been to that college yet, and they take these classes just to meet accreditation requirements so that this department or whatever keeps their accreditation and keeps their uh, status or whatever. And so it's never done for the benefit of the student. The schools never, the programs aren't designed to say, let us help you figure out what's good for you. That's not the intent. They love it because they also go, you're not graduating in 4 years. You need 5 years, if not 6 years. Right now, the majority of kids graduate with a 4 year degree in 5.5 years. And it's because the majority of them come undecided. So it's a great business ploy. I personally, if you can't tell, I'm very adamant. I don't like that. But so families that I help, that if they come to me and I'm helping with admissions, I do a lot of mentoring with the students, and we go through a bunch of true north assessments, aptitudes assessments, figure out how they're wired, how their brain thinks, their values, and we really try to drown out the noise, especially the noise of social media, and really try to help them figure out what's the right path for them, what path is going to where they're going to find the most success, and basically have a more intention behind their college path. And those kids are the ones who tend to graduate in 4 years. So anyway, that's my controversial take. Not everyone's going to agree with it, but it, I'm, we can't deny history.
I want to share two quick things. And seriously, we care so much about everyone getting and just as much as they can from the colleges, navigating this process the right way. We will make the point however we have to make it. Um, that's truly our mission. It's truly why you should grab time with us. Just and figure out, are you on the right track? Are you not? Maybe you want us to help. Maybe you meet with us and maybe we don't think we're going to be able to help you. We'll tell you that. We're very brutally honest when it comes to who we can help, who we can't help, and what we can actually do. So, um, but I bet you didn't expect me to share that. I just thought, it would be a funny way to end the night. And thank you, everyone. We went way over time. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there. Take us
Yeah,
out,
thank you guys.
but have a good night, everyone. Bye.